All right. And welcome back again to the Paisan Sports podcast presented by Elevation 5280 Sports. Dante DePlacido joined as always by Zach Deal of What's the Deal Sports. So I've got to ask, what's the deal with these Eagles schedules? All right. Last year, we got screwed out of one home game. We only ended up with seven. We had two home games in the first 6 weeks, if I recall correctly. And then I figured, okay, the new thing they've been doing with the scheduling is since there's 17 games now, they alternate. You get 8 home games one year, nine the next year, and so on and so forth. This year, they only have eight once again. And well, not once again. Last year was only seven. Now this year's only eight. And not only that, they don't have any back to back home games. And not only that, but they're the only reigning Super Bowl champion in NFL history to not have back to back home games. And on top of all of that as well, we're looking at multiple Thursday night games, a Monday night game, a Friday night game, a Saturday night game, basically playing any day besides Sunday. I don't know what kind of schedule they've given us, also not even considering the strength of schedule, which doesn't really feel like anything relevant to bitch about. That happens, especially when you win a Super Bowl and you're a very successful team, even leading up to that. But just the way the rest of the schedule has been handled. I mean, what's the deal with that?
Yeah, I thought the craziest thing that rose my eyebrows when I first saw the schedule was um, between the divisional opponents that they play, because that's usually the first thing that I look at where the divisional games lie. Obviously, we knew beforehand that they were going to be playing the Cowboys week one, which they hadn't done since 2000. Played them in the opening week, which should be interesting. I think they might put the Cowboys in that spot so that an Eagles Cowboys game can be interesting regardless of how the Cowboys season goes. Maybe if they do it later on in the season, they're worried that the Cowboys might tail off a little bit and people might lose interest in a rivalry that seems like people are trying to act like it's dying down a little bit. So that's the biggest rivalry that I know from growing up. I know some people that are a little bit older than me said that the Eagles Giants rivalry is bigger than the Cowboys rivalry, but me personally, it's the Cowboys Eagles. But looking at the Washington games, they played Washington twice in the last three games of the season, and they played the Giants, even though one of the Giants games is on Thursday Night Football. They played the Giants twice in 3 weeks as well. So I just was kind of dumbfounded why the schedule ended up with the Eagles playing two divisional opponents um, twice in 3 weeks on two different occasions throughout the season. Plus, both of those Washington games are going to be pivotal in the playoff race, and they're going to be flex option games. I mean, the Week 18 date doesn't even have an exact date yet because they are obviously had that in the plan of cards that it might be the Saturday primetime game or on Sunday. So they're still trying to figure out Sunday night football. So they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do with that game. And then they're playing the Washington game on Saturday, which is a primetime slate, either 8:30 or either 8 o'clock on Fox or 4:30. I just thought that kind of stuck out to me a little bit. They get the Chiefs obviously week two. So that's a Super Bowl rematch really early in the season. They usually play, it seems like every time they play the Chiefs, it's early in the season, but they play the Chiefs. And how many times are we going to have to play in Tampa Bay? How many years straight are we going to have to go to Tampa Bay and play them? I feels like this is a third or fourth straight year that they've gone to Tampa Bay because they played
Yeah, it seems like they never play Tampa Bay at home.
the
And
first year of Sirianni, they played Tampa Bay at home on Thursday Night Football because I went there. I went to that game, and that's when the Eagles were like 2-5, and people were like chanting "Run the ball," and that's before Sirianni got committed to running the ball, and then he pivoted. They obviously won down the stretch, and then had to play in Tampa Bay with Tom Brady against Tom Brady for the playoff game that they lost 31-15. So from that point, from that playoff game on, I think every single season they played in Tampa Bay. So it just seems like they're always going to Tampa Bay now. Um, they got robbed of the home game last year, and they're in Green Bay again on Monday Night Football, which that should be a big game. So that's interesting. They get also what was interesting too. They get which was one of the hardest divisions in football with the NFC North, all those playoff level teams that they had last year. Even though I thought the Minnesota Vikings were fraudulent, they get even though there's a bye sandwiched in between there from week 7 to week 13, they play all the NFC North teams in that
That is
slot of games. So
something that's something I didn't even pick up on. That's a good catch by you. Now, the one thing with
also,
last
real quickly, one last thing is they like with those Washington games sandwiched in between those two Washington games at the end of the year is the Bills. So they're gonna have like 3 playoff level games to end the season.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? Even before that, I can see the Raiders being a surprise team this upcoming season.
Well,
I can see them.
they're gonna have a path to being a team that could win because they're just gonna be able to run the ball
Yeah.
well with Ashton Genty. They have a proven quarterback, even though I'm not the highest on Geno Smith. Um, it turned out to be Jalen Milroe, the third round pick that they traded, that the Seahawks ended up using for Jalen Milroe. So I would say personally, I think the Seahawks won that trade, depending on how Milroe develops. But trading for a
Absolutely, and he's a
starting level
younger
quarterback,
quarterback as well.
yeah, but
But
starting for a level start just on the base, the surface of it, starting getting a starting level quarterback for a third round pick isn't a bad idea. I just wasn't a fan of the extension they gave Geno Smith, but their offense should be a lot more competent than it was before. They're going to have Jack Betch probably be their number one wide receiver. I still really don't like their wide receiver options. They got another dude that's like 6'4", 6'5", that runs like a 4.25 at wide receiver. That is probably going to compete. I think his last name's Thornton. So I think he was from Tennessee, if I believe correctly. So they have a little bit of obviously they have Brock Bowers. So Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers itself is going to be enough for them to be a formidable offense, and then their defense still has a long way to go. But if Christian Wilkins can stay healthy, they have a good baseline, and their secondary
yeah,
just
not to mention Max Crosby, of course. Funny enough, what I think really went under the radar is they picked up Devin White. Who knows if he can go back to being a starting level linebacker? He didn't really even get a chance in Philly, but
I
who
mean,
knows what.
he played last year, just not for the Eagles. Played for the Texans the whole season.
Oh yeah, that's right. But I don't think we really heard much of him. Anyhow, I think the Raiders could end up being a surprise team. I think they have a good amount of talent. And depending on how good Ashton Genty is, really also depends on how effective they are. So who knows? The final 4 games could be actually 5 with the Chargers, maybe even 6 with the Bears if they end up playing well. And then before that, you have the Cowboys, Lions, and Packers. So I mean, you
I
could
think
end up finishing the season on one
I think
hell of a
before the
total.
schedule even came out, they had the fourth hardest schedule, and then just looking at it, the first 8 games of the season before the bye, weeks 1 through 8, outside of the Giants week 6 and the Giants week 8 that they have sandwiched in between, they're going to be playing
You,
6 playoff level teams in the first
you
eight
know
games.
what? Looking at the schedule, the only team that I can confidently say most likely will not be a playoff team is the Giants, right? You have the Cowboys, the Chiefs, the Rams, the Buccaneers, the Broncos. Those are all, they could all be not. I don't know if they could all like every team on this roster. I don't know. I don't even know off the top of my head if mathematically they could all fit into the playoffs. But these are all teams that could very easily make the playoffs from what we know. And then after the Giants, then you have the Vikings, Giants again, but then you have the Packers, Lions, Cowboys, and so on, the other teams that I've mentioned. So, I mean, really, like, just going into the season, the only teams that I can say I think, are likely to not be playoff teams are the Bears, Raiders, and Giants. I think Raiders are more so 50-50 the way I see them. I think the Bears might also be about 50-50. But everyone else, I feel like it's more likely than not that they're going to be a playoff team. But the one thing I did want to get into is, at least with last year's schedule, the way it started out with us not having any home games to start the year, it was like, okay, we don't have any to start the year, but at least at the end of the year, we have, what was it, like 3 out of the last 4 games were at home, 4 out of the last 6, something like that. Um, you know, um, 2 out of the last 5 games are at home. We start off 2 of the first 3 are at home. We're home, then we're away, then we're home again, but then we're away, then we're home, then we're away,
It's
then
pretty
we're
much
away.
alternate. The thing that I just noticed about
Yeah,
the schedule
it's much
too is
more consistently alternate.
if you look at the schedule, look at all the away games they have. The only away game versus a non-playoff level team is the Giants. They play the
Well,
Chiefs in Kansas City. They play Tampa
mm,
Bay in Tampa Bay.
yeah.
They play Minnesota in Minnesota.
Yeah, they have to go
Like
up to
Green Bay.
Minnesota and up to Lambeau. So not even
Yeah,
well, what am I saying? I'm starting to sound like the reporter
they get the
interviewing
Chargers also
Alshon Jeffrey.
away.
Vikings
They
playing
get
a
the
dome,
Bills
but
away. They get the
they will
Bills
have to deal with
away
the
as well.
cold in
So.
Lambeau. I think it's November 10th, so you know what? They might very well luck out with playing in Green Bay earlier in the year. I can't see it being that cold there at the time, but Buffalo on December 28th, that's going to get cold, definitely.
I mean, the Northeast gets cold. I mean, we're also a
Yeah,
Northeast team too, so it's not
yeah.
like
I
most
mean,
teams
yeah, the
like
Northeast gets
weather.
cold, but not as cold as Buffalo. Buffalo is like what, a half hour from Canada. Um, but and not just the cold they have to deal with, but they have to play in Tampa Bay on September 28th. That could end up being a game where it's very hot.
I remember
And
Reed Blankenship last year couldn't even finish the game because he was cramping up.
yeah,
That game was an absolute disaster too. So
yeah. So that could also be another issue. But listen, the one thing I can say positively about this schedule that I couldn't say last year is there's no international games. There's no Brazil. We don't have to go to Germany. We don't have to go to London. At least we're staying in the United States, which is good.
yeah,
So, looking at the schedule, I'm not sure if you saw. Oh, actually, before I get into that, I need to ask you, did you see the schedule release video?
for the Eagles,
Yeah.
I saw parts of it, but I thought you were asking me about another team's schedule release video.
No, well, I think the Eagles schedule release video was perfect. It was just a cinematic video of the Lombardi, and at the very end, they just flashed the schedule in small font on the screen for like 2 seconds. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. What team were you referring to?
I thought you were talking about the Tyreek Hill controversy,
Oh, I did see that.
which
I
also was
did
the
see
Will
that.
Levis. I think Will Levis got done dirtier than Tyreek Hill, honestly.
What happened with Will Levis? I didn't see that, but I saw the
They had
Tyreek
like a
Hill thing.
party bus running Will Levis over, which I
What?
thought was more foul of a joke to make about like running somebody over and killing them than
Wait,
just
wait,
some
wait.
person.
Is there like a reference there I'm not getting?
I think it's because his girlfriend like was like partying with Titans players. His ex-girlfriend that was like famous or popular
Oh,
online
Gia
was
Duddy or whatever her name is.
partying with like Titans players around the draft time
I didn't know that.
this
That's
year.
hysterical. No, that's actually really funny. Yeah, the Chargers killed it then. The Chargers killed it. I thought the Minecraft thing was corny. But the jokes they had within it, I've seen bits and pieces of.
Yeah, that was like I thought my first reaction is like that appeals to like the younger crowd, but like the
But the
football audience,
actual
there's like so
jokes.
much more of the audience that's the demographic is like 18 to 75 than it is like the youth, you
Yeah.
know. What I mean?
Well, I think they were trying to
Or whatever.
capitalize
I
on
mean,
like
it's
the
like it's all
YouTube and
about social
Minecraft
media and trends
movement.
and stuff. It doesn't really
Yeah.
matter either way. Some teams put a lot of emphasis into it. I could care less what the video looks like. So
Yeah, but I did see when they showed The game against the Chiefs, they had the Chiefs getting beaten down by Eagles, so I did appreciate that.
I like how the bye is sandwiched right in the middle. I feel like this schedule,
It's a
even though
good
it's a
buy.
tough
It's a
schedule,
good buy.
it's a tough schedule, but it obviously alternates every year. So, like when the schedule's made and it alternates, you never know which division is going to be the hardest division. So, there's teams that are historically the best teams that are from the same division, but you never know how this schedule is actually going to fall because of teams like going up and down the totem pole in the NFL. The Eagles are obviously getting a different type of schedule than most teams in the league because they're the premier team right now in the NFL, besides the Kansas City Chiefs, are the most successful team. And since the 2000s, they've been one of the most successful teams. So that's why they're getting displayed on so many different weeks or days of the week. They play on what? A Monday, a Sunday, a Friday, a Thursday, a to be announced, 2 Thursdays in the first 6 weeks of the season.
It's
Um,
crazy.
Flex, there's already built-in flex options for them for primetime games, which is a Saturday game. They have a to be announced slate to end the season versus a playoff team, which will be a primetime slate. They get a Black Friday game, which last year's Black Friday game was the Dolphins and the Jets. So I mean, those two teams really aren't premier top, even though the Jets play in a big market and the Dolphins do too. But yeah, I feel like this is a pretty fair schedule, honestly. They get a bye in the middle of the week. They alternate between home and away games, and they just are playing teams that are tough. But outside of the division games being weirdly made up, I feel like this is a pretty fair schedule. It's better to have the bye like sandwiched in the middle of the season than where they had it last year.
Yeah. No, well, the funny thing is, going into last season, we all complained about the bye. It was too early of a bye. We were all upset about it, but it ended up coming at the perfect time. Let's be honest. I mean, going into that bye week, the Eagles were
I know,
banged
but
up
a
with
lot of for the
injuries.
crowd that wanted Saquon to break the record, that's not, you're not appealing to that crowd.
How do you figure?
Because if the bye was later in the season, they might not have like that was the whole storyline. Is like that everybody
Oh,
needs
right. Yeah, yeah. I
the
remember we
last
were
game of
even
the season
talking
versus the
about that.
Giants.
Yeah, we were talking about, well, they haven't had a bye week in so long. You give them a week off. But listen, we ended up with a Lombardi trophy. I'd take that over a rushing record any day of the week.
Did you see the
Um,
NFL Network the way that they broke down the schedule?
yeah, they had the Eagles starting 1-3.
I think
I,
it was two. I think it was 2 and 3. They had them losing
well,
like from.
eventually 2-3, but they
They
had
had
them
them
winning the
losing
first game and then
the
losing three
Chiefs,
straight.
Rams, and Bucks games consecutively.
Yeah, so they had them starting off 1-3. I'll tell you what, if the Eagles start this season 1-3, not only will I be ready to jump off the Walt Whitman, but my God, imagine WIP during that week. You know, I don't think, and I don't even think that's really a realistic prediction. The Eagles starting the season 1-3. I think that's just an absurd take.
I mean, they're playing all good teams, so
Yeah,
it's
but
not an absurd take.
they're a great team. They're the reigning champs. It's
I
not
know
like
that
they can't handle
I
good
feel the
teams.
same way. I'm just saying these teams were spread out across the. You could argue that these are the three toughest opponents besides the Lions that they'll see on the entire schedule. The Lions and the Lions, Bills, and Commanders.
Yeah, but still, I mean, come on. The idea of them starting, I
I'm
could
worried
see
about the
if they
Tampa
had him
game.
starting off
I feel
two and
good about the
two.
Rams game's going to be tough at home, regardless of it being home. The Rams
No,
game's
I think
definitely
we got the Rams. I think we got the Rams. The Rams don't really scare me. Especially now without Cooper Cup. They don't
yeah.
really
They
scare
added
me.
Devontae Adams, who's 2 times better of a receiver than Cooper Cup. So
He's not the same Devontae Adams.
Cooper Cup has
But
1,000 yard receiving season in his career. Devontae Adams is like borderline top 15 in all receiving stats.
yeah, but not he's not currently a top 15 receiver. Um
I beg to differ. That's a crazy statement to make, but
anyway, um I could see if okay, Super Bowl champs, but really tough schedule to start the season. They start 2-2. I could see that. I wouldn't argue too much with that, but 1-3, come on. I that's just insulting in my
It wouldn't
opinion.
shock me. 2-2 wouldn't shock me. They win
Two
both
and two
games
wouldn't shock me. I
and then
could
they
see,
lose both games on the road.
especially since they started last
Well,
season 2-2, but 1-3, that's just ridiculous.
I'd rather get the losses out of the way early in the season than figure things out with a younger team and get cooking and then have like a lot of momentum going into the playoffs. Then start off strong and then flare out like we did in 2023. And then you saw how that season ended. So
I mean, yeah, but also 2022, they started off even better than 2023, and they made it all the way to the Super Bowl and lost because of a controversial call and an untimely fumble. More so the controversial call, but yeah, I mean, even if they start off hot, I think they could finish hot. They're not the 2024 Titans who we will actually. You know what? That would be a good segue. Do you have any other comments on the NFL schedule?
no, I kind of wanted to talk. We never really talked about the Cowboys even getting George Pickens. I wanted to talk
Oh
about that.
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, we did not bring that up. Okay, yeah. So
I feel like he adds a little bit of talent to their offense. They obviously didn't have a second wide receiver. Brandon Cooks was not the same player when he went to Dallas. They pretty much just throw the ball to CeeDee Lamb every single play. So they utilize the tight end too. But George Pickens, I guess, makes their offense a little bit better. Um, I I don't like Javonte Williams personally, so I feel like the running back field could still is lacking talent. But
I
you know,
think their
they got
backfield
back
is
they got
lacking a
Jaden
lot of talent.
they
And
got
I don't
Jaden
just
Blue
say
in the
that because
draft.
they're the Cowboys. Their backfield is going to suffer. The run game is going to suffer.
I'm pretty sure
Um,
they drafted 2 running backs.
I don't think
They drafted one in the
did they?
4th and drafted one in the f yeah, they drafted one in the 5th, Jaden Blue, and then they drafted Phil Maffa in the 7th from Clemson. So,
Yeah,
Jaden
I mean,
Blue's a decent talent for a 5th round pick. I actually liked what they did in the draft. I like the 3rd round pick that they got with their cornerback, Siobhan Revel. He just has some injury concerns.
I thought their
Linebacker,
second
Jamar
round
James.
and third round picks were really good. Obviously, I couldn't say otherwise about their second round pick. Otherwise, I'd be a hypocrite with how much I wanted their second round pick here in Philly. Um, but I thought the second and third round was really good for them. I think their first round pick, I think, is going to be hit or miss. And that will really determine whether they end up having a strong run game or not, because over the past few years, they've lost a lot on that offensive line. As of right now, their first round pick from last year hasn't really worked out on the offensive line. He hasn't played very well. If their first round pick this year, that offensive guard whose name I'm blanking on, but if he doesn't
Kyle
show up,
Hubbard.
yeah, that's right. If he doesn't show up and play well immediately, then that's going to be a weak offensive line with weak running back talent. And then at that point, having receivers like CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens might become irrelevant because teams will just be able to sell out on the pass all day long. So getting George Pickens definitely a good addition for them. But I
They're
think
just counting on a lot of guys via trade in the offseason. I mean, they traded for what? Kyer Alam from the Bills, former first round pick from Florida, the cornerback. They traded for former first round pick Kenneth Murray, the linebacker. They traded for Joe Milton as their backup quarterback. They're just relying on a lot of guys, and a lot of these guys will need contracts in the near future too. And they still haven't even resolved the best player on the roster and getting him signed. They signed a defensive tackle that's a decent player, but they gave him a big contract for a guy that isn't really a household name to too many people that are outside of NFC East fans. And they still haven't signed their best player. And then they trade for a wide receiver that's very talented but has behavioral concerns and is going to need a contract after the year is up. Also, I heard alarming things about George Pickens, not even just trying to be biased, but I heard like George Pickens was showing up to the Steelers games like literally less than 90 minutes before the game started, and when the team had to put their active player list out to the NFL, and he would show up after that time period and time frame. So I thought that was pretty crazy to hear
I
from
did not hear
people.
that, but and the rumor is that's why the Steelers moved on from Pickens because he's just too big of an issue in the locker room. I think
Oh,
from an
he's
outside.
also just really inconsistent. I looked at his career log, and I think he has like 21. Um, I'll pull it up real quickly because he's a young player, so it won't take that long.
Well,
But
while you pull that up, my
he's had good playoff stats, which is obviously a plus.
well, that's
Which is
something
good about the
Dallas
guy.
has been needing for a long time is somebody who can perform in the playoffs. But I mean, with Pickens, with his issues, I, in my opinion, I think. I mean, we haven't really heard any exact reports on it, but Micah Parsons seems like a locker room issue to me. He's always blabbering about something. So you accompany that with
I think
George
people
Pickens.
respect Micah Parsons because of his talent. I think he works hard and means well. I think he just like is immature with how he
Yeah,
goes
I
about
can agree with
things.
that statement. He's not
So
like
I feel
he's a
like
different
it's
kind
not a
of.
harm to the locker room because people know that he cares and he's trying to make the best for the team and like he stands up for the team. Like when DeMarcus Lawrence made those comments and he left. So I feel like the hate that Micah gets is a little overboard just because he's the best player on our least favorite team. So that's why we're
No,
obviously
I no,
all
I don't
for
think
it.
that's why. I think it's because he's absolutely insufferable. He's always making some sort of nonsensical
Well, yeah, when
comment.
you react, when you always react like in big ways, like to what teams around you are doing,
It's not well,
it's
he's
like
not even
every
just
year it's his favorite
reacting. Like
player.
literally just what today was it? He was just randomly talking shit on Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, like unprovoked. So it's not even just reactionary.
I don't
It's
think
just
it's
him
unprovoked. I
constantly
mean,
making comments.
it probably stemmed from the schedule release and that being the first game of the season. That's what the focus is automatically on. So that's what I think that probably was spurred from.
But either way, I'm sure I could find other examples
But
of
they had a
him
good draft.
doing
Real
shit
quickly,
without being provoked for it.
let's just pull up the other NFC's teams since the schedule dropped and look at their drafts and see how much better they actually got. So the Cowboys really didn't do much in free agency. They just traded for those guys that we mentioned and then had a good draft. Like Jerry Jones always has a good draft. He just has problems retaining his players. Let's look at Washington. They obviously made the big Laramie Tunsil trade. We gave them some draft assets to move up for Cooper DeJean last year. So they traded for Laramie Tunsil, and that didn't stop them from taking a first-round tackle with Oregon tackle Josh Connerly. We talked about him being the guy from the viral video of Mike Green just absolutely dominating him in that one video of just getting underneath of him and just blowing him up. But he is a good tackle. I feel like he's a little bit weak at the point of attack, though, but he's a former five-star, so he's a good player. Second round, they got Trey Amos, a SEC corner, 6'1", 195. He was a guy that could have went. There was buzz about he was like plus 105, I think, to be a first round pick. His odds, and then he fell all the way to them in the second round with the 61st pick. That was from the Eagles too. That was from the Cooper DeJean trade. That specific one. They only had I think they only had 4 draft picks because of the Laramie Tunsil trade.
Huh. I didn't realize that.
So they had him second round, and then Jalen Lane in the fourth round, which was a solid pickup. I don't think he was supposed to be a fourth rounder, and then they got a linebacker in the sixth round. So it's a decent draft. Obviously, a lot of it was built around Laramie Tunsil. They also did so much in free agency, but it was pretty much bringing back all the veterans that they signed last offseason of one-year deals and just brought all those guys back. So it was a good cast of guys, but they're 1 year older and they're all vets. They traded for Deebo Samuel too, so they spent just draft assets to go out and get guys that are proven and ready now. So they got Deebo Samuel,
Yeah,
another
it's
year
it's
of
an interesting approach when you're building around a young quarterback.
I think
Um,
the sleeper for Washington might be Luke McCaffrey. Christian's brother might take that next step, being the second round pick from last year, and then that would make their offense pretty dynamic if they have
yeah.
McCaffrey, Debo, and what's his name? Oh, Terry McLaurin making some noise, and then the Giants too, who made the trade back into the first round. So let's see how many draft picks the
I can
Giants.
I can give the Giants a ton of credit for drafting Abdul Carter. That guy's going to be an absolute monster.
Yeah, Abdul one.
I
Jackson.
am not sold on Jackson Dart. I am not sold on him at
I think
all.
Jackson Dart was better than Shador. It was close though, but I think I would have drafted Jackson Dart instead of Shador. Obviously, the Giants are the team that had the infamous, really bad meeting with Shador Sanders pre-draft, and that's why they didn't go with him and didn't consider him. They were probably one of the teams that took him off the board. They also got Darius Alexander, defensive tackle from Toledo, in the third round. He was somebody that could have went in the first round too. That there was a little bit of buzz of him to go the first round too. That I heard for some people. He's a solid player that adds to a really good pass rush that's forming over there. Cam Scatterbo in the fourth round, who would be a guy that the Eagles love, but we already got our white boy running back in Will Shipley, so I'll take my Will Shipley to your Cam Scatterbo any day of the week. So we'll see how that works out. And then they got fifth round guard, seventh round tight end, and a seventh round cornerback. So we'll see how those guys play out and if they make the roster. But
Wait, hold on. Who was the guy you mentioned before the fifth round pick again?
Cam Scatterbo from Arizona State.
Uh-huh. And why are you not upset about that?
What do you mean?
What you said, because we already have
Will Shipley.
who is,
White.
and that's my segue into talking about the NBA draft lottery, because the Sixers had a chance at a white boy themselves. Would have been another white boy Cooper in this city. Not only another white boy Cooper, but another white boy Cooper who's far too athletic to be white. Typically, great white athletes have the athleticism of great white athletes, but Cooper Flag and Cooper DeJean are even above that. They had a chance at it. They didn't quite get it. But the most important thing is they kept their pick. The tank season doesn't go to waste. And not only did they keep their pick, but they jumped from 5 to 3, possibly putting them in prime position to get the perfect fit that they need, which is Ace motherfucking Bailey out of Rutgers.
Yeah, we'll see if they take Ace Bailey. That's who my front runner is for the pick. That's who the number 3 ranked prospect is. He was the second ranked high school prospect before last year's college basketball season, behind Cooper Flag. At Rutgers, they had him listed at 6'10", but he's actually 6'7" and a
Oh, is
half
he
at the
really?
combine with his shoes off. But they probably measured him with his shoes on, and then
Oh,
with
I didn't
shoes
know that.
on,
That's
which
interesting.
basketball players play with shoes on, he's probably at least 6'9". So I'm not worried about it. Apparently, his hands are a little bit small too. Let's go through the concerns about Ace Bailey, who's the favorite to be the pick. His playmaking, they say, and his lack of like court awareness at times as a playmaker is a little bit questionable. But I also think a lot was made out to be that the guys outside of him and Dylan Harper on the Rutgers team were not up to par, and it was hard for him to make decisions on who he could trust out there because they just weren't as skillful. And that's why a big reason why 2 of the top 3 prospects were on a team that was under 500. But I mean, there was other players. Anthony Edwards played on a under 500, I believe. I know they didn't make the college tournament, but I also think they were under 500. Ben Simmons at LSU's team had like 9 or 10 wins. Markel Fultz played on a Washington team that I think won maybe 12 or 13
Well,
games.
right now you're just giving examples. That's not going to make
I mean,
anybody look
Anthony
good.
Edwards is a top 5 player in the league, and
Well,
he
yeah,
was.
Anthony Edwards,
But
definitely great
Anthony Edwards
example.
also apparently didn't care about basketball, and Steve Kerr told him that he doesn't work hard. He just took Steve Kerr's team out in 5 games. So that, and the workout, Steve Kerr told him that he wouldn't draft him, and then Steve Kerr drafted the biggest bust in James Wiseman in recent memory with
That
the
was,
second overall
and
pick.
you know what?
But
As a
that's
guy
also a
who
bad
also
taste.
likes the Warriors, that was
But that's
so.
also a bad taste because that's a team that could be the example of the situation the Sixers are in. So if you look at the top 3 teams that are in the lottery, the Mavs have, I mean, Kyrie Irving's coming off a torn ACL. We'll see how long it takes for him to get back to the court, and he's older. Anthony Davis is injury prone, but he's one of the best players in the league, undoubtedly, and top 75 player of all time, just like Kyrie. When he's out there on the court, but they have 2 superstar players already, and they have the number 1 overall pick with Cooper Flag. The Spurs obviously had the biggest unicorn in the league in Victor Wembanyama. They traded for De'Aaron Fox. They had the 4th overall pick in Stephen Castle from last year, and then now they had the 2nd overall pick in the lottery. That could be Dylan Harper, and then the Sixers have Paul George, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, Quentin Grimes, and this pick.
Hopefully Quentin Grimes. They still have to re-sign him. So hopefully Quentin Grimes.
Yeah, but I think he wants to be back with the Sixers, and they'll probably talk him up. We'll see how that plays out. But they also, I'm pretty sure, have the bird rights to him, so they'll be able to have him as a restricted free agent if they.
I didn't know that. That's
I believe that to be correct. I could be wrong about that, but the team that mirrors all those teams with all the talent was the Warriors during the championship run. Had those spur of lottery picks between James Wiseman that they used with the 2nd overall pick that didn't work out, that could never bust into the rotation of a team that was competing for a championship. And they also drafted Jonathan Kuminga that had to play when Steph Curry went down and played well versus the Timberwolves, but was out of the rotation at times throughout the playoffs that we talked about on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And he's about to be a free agent. And Moses Moody, who's just not that good of a player, who was a former lottery pick too, the same year as Jonathan Kuminga when they had 2 lottery picks. So for a team that's going to compete for a championship, it's actually interesting. I want them to take the youngest, cheapest player. That's the option that I think best suits the roster with the max contracts that they already have between Maxey, Paul George, and Embiid. And what Daryl Morey said, that he's locked in with those players for next season. Those comments were made before he ended up with the 3rd overall pick, but I actually do believe him that he'll probably end up trying to do that. And the thing that interests me is Ace Bailey's not really a defensive player. He's a really good offensive player that can shoot over the top of pretty much anybody, has a really sweet stroke. And I saw a game where he was going off, I think it was versus Penn State, where he had this crazy dunk where he just exploded, like a crazy explosion, and like literally dunked it so hard he almost like flew over top of the rim. Like it was, I'll have to show you the dunk. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah, I got to take a look at that.
But what I'm getting at with that is he's more so of an offensive player. Tyrese Maxey, the young players on the roster are all offensive-minded type guys between Quentin Grimes, Tyrese Maxey, and Jared McCain. If they draft Ace Bailey, that's another offensive-minded guy. The only defensive-minded guys that they have that are still, relevant on their roster are Joel Embiid and Paul George, who the one thing about Paul George is he's still a really good defender, and obviously Joel's a good defender too. Does that make you more inclined to keeping the veterans like Joel and Paul George because that's what gives you the defensive edge, because all the other guys are offensive guys?
Well, first I want to say, considering, although after, the Warriors suffered injuries and made a couple lottery picks, although they did end up winning a finals after that, with being how big of a bust James Wiseman ended up being, I think this situation is more comparable to the San Antonio Spurs back in the day when David Robinson was hurt for a year. They ended up in the lottery and they drafted Tim Duncan, who once paired with David Robinson, they were able to win a title with those two as an iconic duo. So, as long as if they do end up taking Ace Bailey, who I really hope they take, and he pans out, I think it could be, and they hypothetically win a championship, I think it could be more comparable to the San Antonio Spurs, especially if we're talking about our best player, a center, getting hurt and then accompanying him with an elite power forward. Granted, Ace Bailey is, well, not exactly the same style as Tim Duncan, but considering the current power forward meta of today,
He can play power forward, but I think he's more of a 3. He's pretty much like,
but
I see him as
Paul George.
I think the person like Brandon Miller of the Charlotte Hornets, who was the 2nd overall pick a couple years back. He's like kind of like a Paul George type profile. He's kind of like Ace Bailey-esque. but he's actually, I think, like truly 6'10" without, or maybe closer to
Well,
6'10"
here's
without.
the thing. We are very, even if he is more of a 3, we are very undersized. So I wouldn't hate
And
seeing
we've
him.
always gone like the guard route, the younger, the smaller. Like, I mean,
And
obviously Ben
that's
Simmons was like
also
six
what I
ten,
wanted
but
to
we
get
haven't we
into.
haven't had an opportunity to draft a big wing that can shoot. Ben Simmons wasn't that. We drafted Markel Fultz over Jason Tatum, who Jason Tatum obviously isn't the greatest. And that reminds me that we got to bring up Jason Tatum because that's a huge thing that impacts the NBA for
Yeah, we'll
quite
get to
some
that in a
time.
moment.
But we haven't had a chance to draft a big shooting wing at the top of the draft and how long, and to have him on a cheap contract at the age of 19 years old. I don't think he turns I looked it up too. I don't think he turns 20 until like way down the line, like the end of the year. So you're gonna have a young guy that can learn from some guys. I mean, I would, if they don't take if they don't trade Paul George, it is what it is. I just hope that doesn't stunt the growth of Ace Bailey if they
Well, here's the thing about that. Here's the thing about that. Um, let's say San Antonio takes Ace Bailey, which I think is a real possibility considering they are also very guard heavy. And then we end up with Dylan Harper, who I think at that point it's a
Dylan
no
Harper's
brainer.
also 6'5". I hate when people say this because Dylan Harper,
But we still have a ton of guards, and we even have guards who are at that
yeah, but
same sort of
Dylan
height,
Harper
but
is
they
more
need
talented than all.
actual wing player. But anyway, the point I'm getting to is if you take Dylan Harper, I think it's more likely if you end up having to draft Dylan Harper, I think it's more likely you hang on to Paul George because then you need the size of Paul George. I mean, you look at the roster outside of Embiid, if that's the case, you'll have Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, Quentin Grimes, Kelly Oubre, Dylan Harper, just a bunch of guards, right? But
I saw
if
my meme. By the way, I saw someone list Kelly Oubre as a trade target for the Cavaliers after the Cavs got knocked out of the playoffs. So I thought that was
that is
interesting.
interesting,
He is
but
on a very team-friendly contract for other teams. I mean, this probably, it honestly will come down to a point where, like, Kelly Oubre probably isn't in the plans at all, and he hasn't even been mentioned by Daryl Morey at all. He talked about the young guys like Justin Edwards, Jared McCain, Tyrese Maxey,
Justin Edwards
obviously.
is another one.
Yabusele, he's brought up, who has to get a contract in the offseason as well. Quentin
Do we
Grimes,
still
but
technically have Kyle Lowry?
I think he needs a contract too. But he was actually somebody that was brought up by
But
Morey.
that's
Drummond
yet
and
another guard. And what is he like 40 years old now?
yeah, but they're not going to bring back Reggie Jackson. But Lowry and Drummond were mentioned as guys that could come back for the
He's
Sixers by
39.
Daryl Morey himself too. But Kelly Oubre never got mentioned. He's on a good contract and a tradable contract, tradable asset for them to use, maybe pair with a draft pick to do something. Um, I feel like having a top lottery pick pretty much just kisses Kelly Oubre goodbye because what do you need Kelly Oubre for now? I mean, he was like a good forced into a defensive stopper role, but that's not his profile. He just gets buckets, and that's what he's best at. But like if they add Ace Bailey to the roster, which most likely
If
is
they
what's
do
going to
add
happen,
Ace Bailey, I could
you have
be.
Quentin Grimes. It's between Kelly Oubre and Quentin Grimes pretty much at that point, which it would make sense if you move. Like you traded something for Quentin Grimes, so I feel like they might be inclined to like keep him, but you would have to give him a decent contract. So maybe they're like, oh, well, we'll keep Kelly instead of Quentin Grimes, but I feel like they would favor Grimes over Oubre.
I wouldn't be quick to just get rid of Kelly Oubre. I mean,
I mean, he's got good size. I like to have him in the rotation, but if
he
gonna be
brings a lot. He brings a
if
lot to
Paul
this
George is
team.
still on the roster, I mean, you're going to be playing. I mean, it works. I would like to have a 11-man rotation like the Thunder do, but these are also like carved out role guys in the NBA. So it's going to,
We'll
you're
see
getting
how it plans out. We'll
egos.
see if we can even get our hands on Ace Bailey. I will be as
What would you
great
trade
of a
if
talent
it
as
came
Dylan
down to it?
Harper is.
If it came down to it, what would you trade for Giannis? Do you think that Giannis and Embiid could work if that was the plan? And what would you
I
trade
don't
for
know. I
those?
mean, I think Embiid needs
I wouldn't just because
a
I want the
forward who
cheapest,
can
youngest player.
shoot
I want a
next
player
to
that
him.
matches up with McCain and Maxey's window, just to protect the franchise for years to come. And I think that's the best route. But I also want to be mad if they just got Giannis. You couldn't be mad because the thing about Giannis is there's so much room for error because the things that if he's just like can't shoot, which he's already not a good shooter to begin with, that's not what he does to affect the game. He's one of the best two-way players, can get buckets at the rim whenever he wants. assists the ball and rebounds the ball, so he's not going to be bad under any circumstance. So it's like a safe trade to make, you know what I mean? But I would prefer to get the younger player.
Yeah, as long as the younger player pans out.
Giannis is probably going to go to the Rockets, and also like the Rockets are another team. The Rockets had the 3rd overall pick in Reed Shepherd this year, and he just didn't even play in the rotation at all, and they were the 2 seed.
It was a horrible draft last year. You can't really fault them for that. There was like no talent in that draft. But yeah, I mean, Ace Bailey, like we can't know for certain as of right now if he's going to turn out to be an elite talent.
There's also some steam. The other guy I think would be next to Ace Bailey if they did consider maybe a trade back to like 5 or 6. They could get Trey Johnson from Texas, who's 6'6", really good scoring wing.
I think I'd rather just take Dylan Harper at that point.
Dylan Harper's not good. Like, there's no steam of the Spurs taking Ace Bailey over Dylan Harper. It's all about Dylan Harper being the Spurs pick or the Spurs trade.
They are very guard heavy, so it does seem like a possibility they take Ace Bailey.
Well, I think all the conversation about the Spurs is about De'Aaron Fox being the odd man out, like them just moving on from him real quickly and shipping him out to like another team. But there's teams out there that just have a bunch of assets stockpiled up on the roster of young players. Like the Rockets just have like 4 lottery picks just sitting on there that could get traded. The Pistons are the same way too. They had Ron Holland barely play for them. That was like the 5th pick last year. They have Jaden Ivey that was hurt for the season this year, who got hurt for the rest of the season this year. Was a former top 5 pick. They could package like 2 guys like that. And maybe like Tobias and go, make like a Giannis trade. So, teams like that.
We'll see how it
crazy.
plays
The Utah
out.
Jazz and the Wizards ended up with the 2 worst records, and they didn't even come close to getting the first pick. Since they did like this lottery setup, the team that ended up with the worst record hasn't got the number 1 overall pick. So it's just crazy the Mavericks made that big of a mistake. And then now
I think, listen, man,
the Sixers got bailed out.
Rigged.
The Spurs got lucky, but the Sixers and the Mavs got bailed out.
I think the NBA draft might be rigged.
And Daryl Morey's reaction to it was like he truly believed that the Sixers had a chance to get the number 1 pick. Like he was so bummed out when they didn't get the number 1 pick, which makes me believe that he's going to at least try and get on the phone with Nico and try and somehow coerce him into a trade.
Listen, if we could somehow, some way package Paul George with the 3rd pick for the number 1 pick, if we could somehow, I mean, that would be a
crazy scam. It'd be a scam that I'd be down to do, but it would never happen. But this is the best case scenario of like a scam the Sixers could pull. Is we have to give the Mavericks Joel Embiid for the 1st pick, but they give us back Anthony Davis, who's younger and almost just as talented, but like we still have a top level center that we get back, and then we give them a 3rd for the 1st. And then maybe like we get rid of McCain, but at that point, then we have Cooper Flag.
No. I'm not all for that. What I am all for, think about Paul George, the 3rd pick, and then those 2 picks we got from LA when we traded Harden. I would do that in a heartbeat to move up to 1.
That's not a possible trade because you have to get a top level.
You got to think about the money. God damn it, stupid.
There's only so many contracts that are going to match up with Paul George's to be able to
I didn't consider that. Anyhow, before we move on to my meatball of the week, let's talk about Jason Tatum.
Yeah, that's just also more of that's just kind of like, do you go out and does that give you incentive to go out and trade for a proven player now? Because, you saw the number 1 Cavs, 64 wins go down in 5 games. The Pacers have made back-to-back Eastern Conferences, just kind of, they're a really good team, but they've also benefited from some injuries from other teams, but they're also a really good team. The Pacers are by far one of the 4 best teams in the East, probably one of the guaranteed 3 best teams in the East and have been for the past 2 to 3 years. So the Pacers are really good, but the East is wide open with the Celtics having the Jason Tatum injury. There was already talks that the Celtics would have to get rid of like Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday to cost cut to keep their championship window open this summer, and now they're on the ropes in the playoffs, possibly about to lose their series, and Jason Tatum won't only miss the rest of this playoffs and might be the reason why they don't go further in the playoffs. But he's most likely going to miss the rest of next season. Like we
And
talked about, the Cavs are kind of fraudulent. The
not
Cavs,
only that, but Al Horford is aging yet another. I mean, he's got to fall off already.
well, I
I
mean,
would
when you take,
I would
yeah,
logically think the guy is 38 years old.
I don't even like. I don't even really think he matters to this conversation because, like you said, he's old, and we're not talking
Yeah,
about
but
like
he
Derek
still
White.
brings
We're not talking
value
about
to
Derek
them.
White
I
getting hurt.
don't
We're
get it,
talking
and it
about
pisses me off. Okay, he's a free agent next year. Thank God, man.
we're
Maybe
not
he'll
talking about Derek White getting
retire.
hurt. We're talking about like Jason Tatum, their best player, getting hurt. So,
Yeah, I know.
and the Magic aren't proven. If you look at just like the Bucks are about to blow up with Giannis leaving them. I mean, this is an opening that the Sixers have to capitalize on. So I think they could still compete and be really good. I mean, the thing that really intrigues me when they got this third pick, the asset, is like their bench is going to be so good. I feel like the players that they're going to be, they're going to possibly be able to bring McCain and Grimes off the bench, and maybe like a Kelly Oubre coming off the bench,
yeah. Yeah,
and like
well,
a Yabusele.
here's the thing. At least know that out of McCain, Oubre, and Grimes, one of them is coming off the bench. At least one of them is coming off the bench.
Grimes is not starting now with Ace Bailey. If like he's the pick, he's not going to start. So I love him coming
Yeah,
off the bench, being like a 25-minute a game
but
guy
you
that can
also
give
don't
you
know
like.
how many games Paul George is going to play if he is still on the roster. But that's why I'm saying at least one of them
Well,
is
that's
going to
also
be
what's
coming
cool
off
is
the
like they could trade Paul George and possibly get a good proven player without even the third pick being touched in that trade, and just get the young player and then move Paul George out for something. But Paul George still plays good defense. So now if you add Ace Bailey, he can just be the scorer and Paul George can
Yeah,
just be a
I
slump on
I
offense
really
and it won't
don't.
matter.
Yeah, I
He can
really
just
don't
play good
hate
defense.
that if they do take Ace Bailey, because at this point in Paul George's career, just keeping him as just a guy playing defense. I mean, it's an expensive contract for a guy to just play defense, but if it can
Yeah, but
work,
he'll
it
have an
can work.
occasional like 25-point game,
Yeah,
every now and
exactly.
then.
So if it can work, it can work. So then you're looking at the starting five. You're looking at the offensive output. You're getting offensive output from Tyrese Maxey, from Jared McCain, from Ace Bailey, from Joel Embiid. So you're fine with having Paul George just out there playing defense. That's perfectly okay. You won't need Paul George to
And
score.
then you have guys coming off the bench that can score too.
Yeah, and you have that as well. And like I said,
And
it's
you
not
also
ideal to
like the
pay a
thing about
guy
it, it's
that
not
much
just
to
about
just play
having guys
defense,
like
but
it's not just about having guys that can score and like create for themselves. It's like guys that can situationally score, like as actual role players. Like Kelly Oubre can be a catch and shoot guy. And I actually saw an article about catch and shoot guys. That's why it's intriguing about what they do. And there were some other guys that had really good catch and shoot numbers in the draft class, which is intriguing. But Ace Bailey, I mean, just his ability to just rise over the top and create his shot by being able to shoot over the top of everybody is a dynamic the Sixers just haven't had on their team.
yeah. So I'm excited for the draft, June 25th. As we get closer and closer, we'll have more to sort of report on it. But now is a good time for my meatball of the week. And you know what? Typically, with the meatball of the week, it's about a guy who acted like a total meatball, right? A total dunce, a moron, or just somebody who made a very questionable decision. Maybe somebody immoral, not even a meatball, maybe just somebody immoral, right? But for the first time in the history of the meatball of the week, I am crowning a meatball of the week as a result because they were throwing meatballs, not acting like a meatball, throwing meatballs. Not literally, more so figuratively, but this guy going into the season has been known to be a meatball thrower. One of my favorite Phillies memes is, that you post on Twitter after the Phillies wins. You just lost to known meatball thrower, this person. But since the start of this season, he's been throwing meatballs left and right, week in and week out. It's been atrocious to watch. We thought he was starting to pitch a little better. He had 2 decent starts in a row. And then last night, my God, anybody else on the mound, it would have been a Phillies win and a series win. Instead, it was an embarrassing loss and a series loss. I'm, of course, talking about known meatball thrower, Aaron Nola. Knowles, I've met you in person twice. You're a nice guy. So I do feel this is also the first time in the history of the Meatball of the Week that I'm crowning somebody I've met in person. So I do feel bad to do it, but Aaron Nola, you're my meatball.
I only know one guy that's pitching worse baseball than him, and it's Tanner Huck of the Boston Red Sox, who became the first pitcher in MLB history to allow 11-plus runs in a start in fewer than 3 innings twice in the same season. And that was
Wait, what? I didn't know
Tanner Huck.
about this. I knew
Tanner
he was
Huck
pitching bad, but I didn't know that. Jesus.
on April 14th and April 14th and
Wow.
May 12th of this season. Yeah, I think he actually just got optioned down. So that's the only
You would
thing
think.
worse. Aaron Nola's got what, the fourth worst why am I drawing a blank of the stat? ERA in the entire
What's his
MLB,
current
and
ERA? 6.
he has
Oh my
tied
God.
for the most amount of losses in the MLB. I
He
said
has
it the other day.
7.
He's
7 losses
He's 1-7. He's horrible.
in freaking May.
He also, I was watching him.
34 earned runs given up.
I was watching him. He's throwing his fastballs like topping out at like 92 in the first inning. I mean, if you're going to be able to hit like nowadays for what hitters have seen in like current baseball, and you got guys like Aroldis Chapman still throwing like 103 at 38 years old, and there's so many more of those guys that have so much more velocity. I feel like it's an issue that Ranger has as well. Is like when your fastball tops out at 92 and you consistently throw it as one of your main pitches, like, and you're just throwing it in the strike zone, it's just easy pickings.
Yeah,
I
well,
think it
that's
finally
why
has
he's
caught up to Aaron
known
Nola.
meatball thrower Aaron Nola. That's why he's the meatball of the week, because it's not that it's not just that he's pitching bait. He's just out there throwing meatballs the whole time, and
And
as a
like
result, he's
we
getting
had
lit
him
up
do that
start
in the
after
beginning of the
start.
game. We had him do that in the beginning of the game, and then the game got close. And then at the end of the game, we had Meatball Taiwan Walker come out with one of his meatball performances,
Which was more upsetting to see because he was pitching so well all season up until then. I thought that game still could have been salvageable if they pulled Nola after he gave up the 6 runs, because then the Phillies, because then Schwarber ends up coming up in the next top half of the inning and hitting a home run to give the Phillies 7 runs. If they were to have pulled Nola when they had the chance, they still would have had the lead in that game. I thought it was still salvageable. I thought leaving Nola out there to give up even more runs after that was just an atrocious decision, especially when, because you could make the argument, well, you don't want to get too deep into the bullpen. It's only the 4th inning, but it's the rubber match of the series, and you're off the next day. I think being off the next day, it's like just unload the bullpen and try and make this a win and win the series. But they
that was the
left
first home series that they lost since last July.
Yeah, and I think it was a very winnable home series considering how many runs they scored in the second game of the doubleheader. I mean, just a
It was going to
mediocre
be tough
pitching
regardless with
performance
the
would have got the
doubleheader,
job
but
done.
they had the advantage of the doubleheader being at Citizens Bank Park, so that should have made it a little bit easier for them. But Aaron Nola, when you pitch like that early in the game, I mean, they got 5 runs as support. It's not like he didn't have run support. He got 5 runs in the first inning, and he got absolutely teed off on. And like I said, like 92-mile-per-hour fastball in today's MLB is just like that. Just doesn't work. Like that's not going to work over the strike zone, and that's what he has, and that's what his go-to is. So, luckily, we have Andrew Painter in the woodworks, top 5 overall prospect in the MLB. We are still yet to debut a prospect in the MLB, the only team that hasn't. So,
speaking of top prospects, just real quick side note, I did see on Instagram, Justin Crawford has hit his first home run of the season, and he's currently batting .320. Anyway,
This
back to you.
lineup does need pop, but I don't think it doesn't worry me at all that like him coming up and being the center fielder. That's something that they haven't gotten from that position, and it hasn't really mattered. So I don't really feel like I'd rather their left fielder that of the future that they figure out that situation when they do that be a pop hitter as opposed to what Justin Crawford does provide as a
I
high
agree.
average hitter and an athletic outfielder that has crazy size.
He's
Him,
just a
him with his
he's a
size and
better
speed
version
combo.
of
His
Rojas.
size and speed combo, I feel like, is going to make him like a base running like demon. Like he's going to be able to slide and just like create like all different types of situations with how like far out he's going to be able to slide and just how long he is and just be able to get to the plate. So, um, but a guy that was showcased in this series versus the Cardinals. He's not having the greatest season this year, but his resume shows that he's still a very productive player. He's their cleanup hitter. Nolan Arenado, 10-time Gold Glover. So you know what kind of defense you're getting from him year in, year out. That's a thing that the Phillies, the left side of their infield has been lacking for years. Now with Trey Turner, Alec Boehm over there. Do you think Nolan Arenado, I think he had an RBI in one of the games. Do you think you would you entertain a Nolan Arenado trade? Because I feel like Aiden Miller's not actually as close as like Justin Crawford and Andrew Painter are to the majors.
I would agree with that. I mean, I would continue to monitor.
And he also gives you a right-handed bat too.
Yeah, but
If you look at
I
his
would
numbers,
continue to monitor how
no,
Alec
so
Bohm is
this is what I wanted to
performing.
talk about with Nolan Arenado. So I was looking at him just because we were obviously playing him. It was one of the biggest rumors, and still either like Rafi Devers or Nolan Arenado is like the biggest rumor to the Phillies. This probably is easier because even though Rafi's been having issues with his club, the Red Sox, he's got an extension in 2023. He's one of the best hitters in baseball, and he's a lot younger. But Nolan Arenado, the most interesting thing about his stats, you want to know the most appealing thing about a Nolan Arenado trade is?
What's that?
So not only was I kind of shocked at how many home runs he actually like, I knew he was a good hitter, but I thought he was more so known for his defense, and he did play for the Rockies, so it might have been inflated numbers playing in Colorado with the elevation and everything of how balls fly out. But at the age of 24, 42 home runs, 130 RBIs, 25, 41 homers, 133. Next season after that, 26, 37, and 130. Next season, 38, 110 and then 41 and 118. So over a 5-year stretch from 24 to 28 years old, I don't know why it's not telling me how many home runs. He hit like 200 something
Oh yeah,
home runs.
that's looking like Kyle Schwarber and Philly home run numbers. Who
That was a
is
lot younger, but you know what the most I'm like, why is he hitting so many home runs like in Colorado? You want to know how many games that he plays a year? 24 years old, 157, 25, 160, 26, 159,
mm,
27, 156, 28, 155. This is all in consecutive years, missing less than 10 games every year. And then he's now 30. He just turned 34 April 16th. And age 30, he played 157. Age 31, 148. Age 32, 144. Last season, 152. This year,
he's got
already
30.
40.
He's got 40 under his belt so far this year. So yeah,
That's
he
what I'm
plays
saying.
very
So
consistently. He
he's
has a
actually like
1.0 WAR. I think the thing with Nolan Arenado, like the way he's been performing the past 2-3 seasons, you go out and get a guy like that, right? You get a big name like Nolan Arenado. You bring him on a big contract, that is. Currently making 21 million a year. You bring although actually he has 1, 2, 3 years left on that deal, but he's still making a lot per year. You bring him over to Philly. Now, that's a situation where the fans are going to be expecting a lot out of him. And if he performs the way he's been performing the past 3 years, not to say he's been performing poorly, but with how big the name is and how big the contract is, the way he's performing, there's going to be a lot of disdain from Philly fans. A
yeah, but I already
lot of
thought of
disdain.
I thought about the same thing, and you're not going to put him probably above Castellanos in the batting order, and he's going to be behind all the other guys in the front of the order. He's just going to replace Alec Boehm at like 7 or 6 at most in your lineup, and you'd feel good about him being your
But
sixth or there.
but with the way he's performing and his contract, is it really like a huge upgrade from Bohm? I don't know if it is. I mean, he's a much better defender, but does the
You know how many
bat?
runs they could save just on defense alone too? Like that's also something I feel like
But
that kind of
the
underrated about him.
bat is. I don't think the bat is
Yeah,
better
but he's
than
also
Bohm
playing. He's also
enough to
like they
justify
just got rid of Paul
taking on a
Goldschmidt.
massive contract, especially with
He's
the
all, they just got
contract.
rid of Paul. They just got rid of Paul Goldschmidt. He's the only veteran in the Cardinals lineup. They got rid of pretty much. They got rid of Tommy Edman last year. I mean, he's the only veteran in their lineup, and um, he's really just like forced into that. I mean, Javi Baez is having a better season this year, and he's like the third highest paid third baseman, but he doesn't even play third base anymore. Arenado is the second highest paid third baseman in the MLB. The first is Anthony Rendon, which is the worst contract in the history of sports. I mean, that Anthony Rendon contract is outrageous. It's crazy that Washington, like thinking about that Washington team from years back. Alec Boehm's actually the 14th highest paid third baseman in the league. So
Well, yeah, but that's a 1 year. That's a 1 year deal at the moment. Um, but anyway, look, I don't know how I would feel about trading for Nolan Arenado. I feel like I mean, you have a personal love for Nolan Arenado. That's a guy you've brought up on this podcast quite a bit. You're a
not
big
a
fan of
personal.
his,
It's
so I
just somebody.
get it.
It's just been the number one rumor that's tied to the position of need of a guy that's underperforming that they pretty much don't see as their future. They need to add veteran guys. I'm not all for like getting the team on an older timeline, and I know he's an older player, but he's still a productive player, and he's a good
Yeah,
at
he is
least a good
productive, but I
defenseman.
don't know if he's productive enough to justify it. But anyway, I want to talk about some guys that are currently on the team. I was previously going to segue over to Kyle Schwarber, but one guy I do actually really want to talk about, a guy who closed out the one win of the series, the first game of the doubleheader. A guy who started off as the worst pitcher in baseball. A guy who we were looking at him and we were looking at Jeff Hoffman and we were saying we got rid of Jeff Hoffman who's lights out. Instead, we got this little Dicky lookalike who's just ruining games left and right. We were all upset. Now it's flipped. It's like that episode of Seinfeld where Elaine's up, George is down. All of a sudden, George is up, Elaine's down, right? Because they mentioned on the broadcast the first time he came out and started pitching well again, the first of what's now 6 consecutive appearances out of the bullpen, maybe even 7. I think it's 6 though. I'm pretty sure it's 6. 6 consecutive appearances out of the bullpen without giving up a run. The first of that 6, they said they believed the issue with him was they felt he was tipping his pitches. They've since corrected that, and they think he'll start pitching better from now on. And since then, he has not given up a run, which if he was just pitching well, I would still be worried because of what we saw earlier. But considering they said, hey, listen, we think we fixed him and he hasn't given up a run yet, now all of a sudden I have a ton of confidence in him. And of course, that's Jordan Romano.
Yeah, he looked good in that spot. We'll see. I mean, it's a long season, Hopefully he can just like kind of just stay even more so than just having like such vast ups and downs. I think the rest of the bullpen is still really shaky. I mean, Tanner Banks has been like one of their guys that they've had to like call on as like a top 5 guy, which I don't believe in. Matt Strom just is an all-star level Matt Strom that got the contract extension. So Taiwan looked good until that spot. I still feel decent about like Taiwan in different spots, giving them like 2 to 3 innings here and there if he's going to be on the roster. So I still feel like there's a good role for him, but they'll be adding to the bullpen by the trade deadline. So
Yeah, listen, I'm not saying the bullpen issues are fixed,
Hopefully,
but
it's just not. Hopefully, it's just not like a complete overhaul like they tried to do last year, and it's just like they can have guys that are more consistent, have an actual foundation that they can build around. Like if Romano's pitching better, Kirk can start being more consistent. If Strom can get back to close to the level that he was on, and then you have Alvarado, that gives you 4 guys to truly work with, and then build around those guys and see what you can add to the rotation, then have Taiwan in that specific spot to give you 2 to 3 innings at times when you need them, more so than
yeah,
just like a 1
and
inning
and
guy.
listen, speaking of
And then they'll have more
Kirkering,
options too when I think at the trade deadline, I think the best plan of business, like I think they had to cut ties with Ranger Suarez at the trade deadline. I think it's just time to move on
I
from
think,
him.
look, the trade deadline is far from now. They have a lot of different pitchers. You know, you have Taiwan, you
It's really
have
not that far from now.
Ranger.
It's the end of
It
July, but like
depends.
this is
It
like if
depends
you get,
if Painter is up by then and if he's pitching well. It,
well, that gives you more options.
whatever starting pitcher they move on from, if they move on from one of them, I don't think they're at a position right now where they could make a definite decision at this moment. Or
Well,
like as
Ranger's the odd
fans,
guy
like,
out because Jesus Luzardo that they traded for is a
well, he's
left-handed
been
arm.
lights out.
He's
He's
one.
been
He's
phenomenal, dude.
he's got the
I did.
lowest. He's got the
Uh,
lowest ERA in the National League. He's a left-hander. They gave Christopher Sanchez a really good contract that's team-friendly, who's a left-hander. They're stuck with Nola, who's no one's trading for that contract right now. They have Wheeler, right-hander. Nola, obviously right-handed. So Painter's coming up. As a left, they're not going to need 3 lefties in their rotation, and Rangers just not pitching well. And I think Rangers just not going to be.
But Ranger just returned
Ranger will
from
never get
injury.
back to
This is
what we
what I'm
saw.
saying. It's too early to be like, yep, Ranger's the guy we got to trade. But his second start, he went 7 innings, didn't give up a run. He came back from injury. He had the really bad start. Then he had the great start. You can't just go off of one great start and one really bad start and
That's
just
not what I'm
make a
basing it off of. Was he
decision
not shaky?
on
He
what
was
you're going to
shaky
do
for.
with him. You
He's in the
can't make a
last year.
decision right now.
Oh, so yeah, let's just let his contract just like run out for the rest of the season, get nothing for him, and just let him walk as a free agent.
I listen, all I'm saying is
That just would
just
be
wait.
idiotic
I'm not
with the
saying let's
lack of
definitely
assets.
keep him. I'm saying let's not make a decision right now, 2 starts into his 2025 campaign. I'm saying I'm not making a decision either way. I'm not saying let's keep him and let the contract run out. But I'm also not saying let's trade him. I'm saying let's wait a bit and see. We still have some time for the deadline. It's too early to make an exact decision
I'm
now.
talking about when the deadline arises. I'm not talking
Well,
about
hold
trading
on,
him.
because I've been trying to get back to what you mentioned earlier. I keep having to push forward. I want to go back a second real quick because I wanted to mention a guy that you mentioned, which is Kirkering, who, you know, at first I was high on, you weren't, and then he pitched really bad. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I can't keep defending him. But then I was like, you know what? I still like his stuff. His past 9 appearances out of the bullpen, he's given up 2 runs, and that was spaced out in 2 different appearances. His past 3, he hasn't given up a run. He's been pitching a heck of a lot better. His ERA as of April 22nd was 6.48. He's gotten it down to 4.32 now. He was one of the guys who helped get the win in the first game of the doubleheader. He's looking a lot better, man. So with him and Romano, all of a sudden you go from having no righties out of the bullpen you can trust at all to having 2 that I think you can definitely lean on a bit.
Yeah, but I mean, this is just the unit. All these guys have been up and down in the past. So I mean, outside of like Jose, I'll always trust Jose. But outside of him,
Absolutely. Jose, Jose, Jose,
he
Jose,
takes like 10
Jose.
espresso shots. But hopefully, they have like a fibrillator right there in case he ever, topples over if he drinks too many espresso shots.
Oh
I
yeah, I
drink
forgot about that.
I drink like 2 a day, and I feel a little crazy about doing 2 in a day, and he does like 10. So that's just outrageous. He has like an espresso tattoo too.
Yeah,
So
some people have high caffeine tolerances, man. Also shout out to Jose for the hat he wore on Mother's Day. I forget what exactly it said, but I think it was like "I love you, mom" or something like that. So that was very nice. Um,
But Bryce Harper shaved his head. Nick
I did
Sirianni
see
asked
that. Yeah,
amidst his slump. He's actually playing really bad baseball right now. I mean, it's actually pretty
he
crazy.
is, but it's Bryce Harper, so you know he's gonna pull
I know,
out.
but we've been saying everybody's been saying that for weeks, and it's almost gotten worse. Like I never thought like for me, seeing Bryce batting in the 250s is bad, and then seeing it touch 238 is like a whole nother world. Like that's like I think Jordan, who obviously absolutely crushed us. Jordan's one of my favorite players in the league, but I always like after I remember he's one of my favorite players in the league. I remember how he sent the Phillies home with that home run in the World Series off Jose Alvarado.
I can bring that up.
I think he was batting like Jordan was batting like low 200s or something close to that. So he's also
I
slumping
can,
too. But
I can bring that up. Also, before I get into the last guy I wanted to talk about,
yeah,
speaking of,
Jordan's batting 210 right now, which is crazy.
guys flip flopping, us talking high about Hoffman, and now he's playing like shit, or Kirkering good, then bad, then good. One guy who very early on you were like, man, he's having a great year. And then you were like, oh, never mind. Forget when I said that. He's having a horrible year. Now he's having a great year again. That's Reese Hoskins. He last I checked, he's batting like 293. He just had like a 3 or a 4 hit game. His home run production isn't anything crazy right now. But yeah, he's batting 292 coming off a 4 hit, 5 RBI game accompanied with a
You want
home
to?
run.
I was watching. I bet on baseball today, and my stupid ass bet on the Orioles again. But now they're officially on the ban list. They're horrific. The Orioles are horrifically horrible. 0 runs today. But one of
Hmm.
the reasons why they had 0 runs today, the Minnesota Twins had Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton collide with each other in the outfield, making a play, and both of them had to come out of the game. So the Minnesota Twins made all these defensive substitutions, so Cody Clemens is in at right field. Ryan Mountcastle hits a ball off the top of the wall that makes this crazy ricochet bounce that, like, if it's a guy like Johan Rojas or Trey Turner, this is an inside the park home run. Or even JT, it's probably an inside the park home run. Like, one of those crazy ricochets off the wall where it
Mhm.
rolls almost all the way in between the outfield and the first base. Bro, Cody Clemens picks up the ball and throws a frozen rope to gun him down at third base to stop a triple. Like the best throw I've ever seen from an outfielder. And we were just talking about
Really? I gotta look
podcast.
into that.
Just a couple podcasts ago, we were talking about when was the last time a Phillies outfielder out threw somebody out. And doesn't like for the Phillies, did Cody Clemens ever even really play the outfield? Wasn't it more so in the infield that he played for
He
them?
he played left field a bit, if I
It
remember
was never really
correctly.
right field.
I
This was like
could
an
be I could be
absolute
wrong, but I think he did play a bit of left field. Speaking of left field, that's a good segue to the final guy I wanted to talk about. A guy who we mentioned this pre-show. I don't think he's going to win MVP, but the way he's playing this season, I think he deserves to be in the MVP conversation at the very least, and that's Kyle Schwarber. I mean, he's having a monster season right now. He has 15 home runs, leads the National League, tied for the MLB lead along with Aaron Judge. I think anytime Aaron Judge is leading the league in home runs and you're able to be tied with him, I think automatically that should at least put you in the conversation for MVP. Not to mention his on base percentage is through the roof. His OBP, his OPS is quite high. It's a monster year from Kyle Schwarber, and I think he should at the very least be in MVP talks.
I'll be in the conversation, but you also just have to credit it just because, we put the most focus on the Phillies. That there's other guys out there having like Corbin Carroll's going absolutely nuclear right now for them, and he's also somebody that steals bases too. So if we're going to compare, Corbin Carroll has one less home run than Kyle Schwarber. His slugging is higher. His OPS is 2 points lower, 972 to 970. And Corbin Carroll has 5 triples and 8 doubles.
Well,
that
you can't
speaks for
expect triples from Kyle Schwarber, but listen, Corbin Carroll,
he's
yeah,
got one so far.
another guy who deserves to be in the MVP conversation. When I'm talking about MVP conversation, I'm talking about like the top 5 guys who should be talked about as an MVP
Pete
candidate.
Crow Armstrong's also going crazy for the Cubs right now at center field. He's actually ranked in 10 different categories amongst center fielders, #1. So he was a really good prospect that's panning out for him. Also, the most untouchable record in sports, off the top of your head, what would your opinion be? The most untouchable record in sports, like statistical, like Gretzky points or like Jerry Rice receiving yards, like in that type of category. I found one that I believe will never be broken. Like I can guarantee it.
Well, I can tell you, I could give you an obvious one, which is the Joe DiMaggio hit streak, but I can tell you a very under the radar one that's completely unbreakable. And I think me and you, it might have been me and you, or it might have been me and my cousin who were talking about this a long time ago. Not the current day Billy Hamilton that everyone knows, but the 1800s Phillies player Billy Hamilton holds the record for most runs scored in a single season, and that record will absolutely never be broken.
I think this one will never be broken. Like anything can happen. I think this one, like I don't even know what type of player it would take to. It's just like a feat that I just don't think will come close to being broken.
And what is that?
36 triples in one MLB season by a player.
Damn, who the hell did that?
Elwin Wilson in 1912. The next closest is 31. There's only been 3 guys in MLB history.
What team did he play for?
I don't even know. It's 1912, it says.
Who's his
The
name?
closest guy, like any date around us, was Curtis Granderson had 23 triples in 2007.
I was okay. Owen Wilson, he played for Pittsburgh. The reason I was curious, I was wondering if he played for the Giants. That's the team that played at Polo Grounds, I would say. He probably got that from just knocking triples at Polo Grounds, which obviously could never be broken because Polo Grounds doesn't exist anymore and there's no
Jimmy
ballpark
had
more triple
20.
friendly. But
Jimmy had 20 triples in one season.
Yeah, and Jimmy was like the prototype of hitting triples, and he only got to 20. How the hell did this guy get
36 triples will never be broken. You like that's a pace where like you'd have to hit a triple every like 4 games.
Yeah. But I do hold on, most runs scored in a season by a player. I do counter that with the most runs scored record, right? Because I'm gonna give you these numbers, okay? Billy Hamilton scored 198 runs in 1894. The next highest is 177. Now you might think, well, that's not that far off. That was also in the 1800s. If I scroll all the way down to find the next highest in this century, it's Jeff Bagwell in the year 2000 with 152. If I try and find one in this decade, it's Ronald Acuna with 149 in 2023. Everyone in the top 10, if I'm looking at this correctly, yeah, the most recent in the top 10 is 1936. I don't know why guys were scoring a lot more runs themselves in the dead ball era, but yeah, that 198, that's never getting broken.
Yeah, I don't think the triples one's getting broken either.
I don't think either is getting broken. Yeah, I think baseball has a lot of unbreakable records. I think the sport with the most breakable records, I think, would honestly be the NFL. 30 assists in a game in the NBA, that's unbreakable. That's never happening.
That's not even the record.
31 maybe then. It's
think
30 or
it's right.
31. I know that for a fucking fact. Maybe 29. 29 to 31.
No, it is 30. I thought Rajon Rondo had like a 31-point game. 31. I know rebounds. I think Wilt had like a 55 rebound game.
Yeah, Wilt's rebound records are never being broken. His 100 points in a game record is never being broken. NBA's got unbreakable records as well. So is the MLB. NFL, not so much. NFL records are being
The
broken every
craziest and the
year.
craziest record with, I mean, Emmett Smith's a rat for just sitting there and racking up yards on an uncompetitive team, 1,800 yards for the Cardinals over 2 seasons without even, just to move the record further for him, just because he's, entitled. But um, I think Jerry Rice's record in today's NFL is actually approachable just based off of like some of the starts to careers that guys like Justin Jefferson had, but the longevity you need
And not
is
only that, it's a much more passing league now. I think Emmett Smith record could be breakable if you consider a guy like let's say if Saquon Barkley was with the Eagles this entire time. That's a candidate to break that record.
well,
All
Derrick
it
Henry.
takes
If Derrick
is
Henry wasn't even the starting running back for the Titans for
yeah,
like the first 2 to 3
all it
years of
takes
his
is a
career,
talent like Saquon or Derrick Henry to be on a team with a good offensive line and to start for 10 years or so.
he also
Um,
just got an extension that was similar to Saquon's extension. It was a little bit less because he's older, but he got the 2-year extension that Saquon
yeah, and
also
he's
got.
and he's playing this well into his 30s now. So I mean, imagine if Derrick Henry was the starter this whole time. Imagine if Saquon was behind a great offensive line this whole time. All it takes is all that needs to happen is these things need to align a bit, and somebody can definitely break Emmett's record.
Yes, sir. But that will wrap it up for episode 98 of the Paisan Sports Podcast. We will be back next week with episode 99. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll have possibly some more news on the Sixers and who they're leaning towards with the draft, although the guy that everyone's eyeing up right now is Ace Bailey, if everything stands the way that it is. We'll have a Phillies update of how the rest of the week goes for them. And if there's any Eagles news, we'll update you guys on that. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.